Hi everyone, welcome to episode 1 of my behind the scenes series for my Music by the Month project. What I want to achieve with this series is to just give a bit of insight into how I come up with the ideas and just how I develop them throughout the production process. And I'm going to be trying to do one of these at the end of every month alongside the release of the actual music. And based that it's January 31st right now, let's begin with that. So whenever I make a piece of music, I want to be able to kind of tell a story, or at least sort of capture a certain feeling or emotion within it. And for this one, just due to the season, I wanted to sort of just have a very fun, summery feel to it. I could have gone with a lot of styles for this, but I think I sort of settled on the synth pop version that it ended up being, just because of when I was brainstorming ideas for it, I came up with the synth riff at the start that I just really liked, so I sort of pursued it throughout the whole thing, and yeah, let's take a look at it now. So the pattern here at the start, it's just based around a chord progression of 1, 5, 4, which is a very simple progression, but I don't think that the theme here really called for a lot of complexity, which is why I think it worked quite well. A lot of the complexity came within the rhythms and melodies of this rather than the actual progression. So I'll just play it here for a second so you can get a listen. So with the rhythm here, I used a lot of syncopation, which is basically emphasis on the offbeat, which I think sort of creates the bounce, and just the whole groove of the song is based around this. It's also, harmonically, it's based around a lot of sus chord resolutions, and especially with the ambient sound I added in afterwards, it's very obvious that it's based around a sus chord major resolution pattern, which also just creates a little bit more interest within the simplicity of it. So as well as having just the sort of rhythmic chords in the intro as well, I sort of had this more ambient pad sound, because I felt that the other chords were very high pitched and almost hollow, so I just wanted to widen out the sound and just fill it up a bit more in the intro. So it's a lot more obvious in here, that sus chord resolution which I use throughout the song, which creates the very chilled out, just very big fun sound. I think that's the key to how the emotion was created. Now that I'd added in those two layers, the idea had really sort of come together very quickly, I felt, and I thought it was time to sort of add in a bit more energy and develop the music direction a little bit more. And because it was started off very simple, I felt the only way you could really go was up and up. So I needed ways to include the energy into the song while still doing it quite smoothly and keeping to the theme as well. So I ended up coming up with this very simple melody here that I sort of slowly brought up the volume and panned it around the stereo as well to sort of make it a bit more ambient and just less direct. Which helped with the smoother transition. I'll just play a little bit of it here just to get the idea. There it is. Yeah, it's once again very simple. A lot of the elements are, but when you bring a lot of the simple elements together, it creates the complexity without overloading the listener, and you can always go back and add more complexity in later if you feel that's what the song needs. Cool. I felt next what the song needed was a little bit of bass, and I quite like writing bass lines because I feel like there's a lot of potential with them that often goes sort of unused or unnoticed in songs. So the obvious choice was just to put notes on the roots of each of the chords, but I do try to add a little bit of harmonic variance to them as well, and not just put them on that root note. I feel like doing this just helps expand the whole sound and just making it a little bit more unique. So it's still very simple, but it sort of has a little bit more movement, which sort of drives the song along. There we go, and you can start to hear the synths and some of the percussion coming in as well. Yeah. Also, alongside this, I ended up adding this main melody down here a little bit later, it slowly builds up, and I've put this automation filter on here that slowly allows more and more frequencies to come through, which changes the timbre of it, which is quite an effective way. So I'll just sort of just solo it here, so you can just sort of hear the effect of it rising up. This is still quite a soft timbre. And then by the time we reach the end of it, it's a very gritty, sort of more loud, bigger sound, which the contrast between the intro and the sort of main section of the song, it just helps differentiate between those. The melody at the start is quite simple. I just sort of wanted to introduce the instrument and in a non-intrusive way to the other instruments, sort of just letting the groove develop and build up until the drop here, where it sort of becomes a bit more complicated. On top of that, just before the main drop as well, I added just a bit of percussion. I was going to use some hi-hats, but then I felt that the tambourine sound here just had a bit more of the more human party summer vibe that I sort of wanted, rather than just a drum kit being recorded in the studio. And I think it added to the whole feeling and theme of the song quite well. So once again, also using just a bit of automation to slowly build up the volume, just to have a bit of a smoother transition between each element. Just play the whole thing. Cool, so now we've reached the drop here, and a lot of the groove is very similar, so I don't want to focus on it too much. Apart from the introduction of the drum pattern, which is a lot different. I added a kick and clap, just still very simple pattern. I'll just solo it. Nothing too interesting here, but still has the very fun, upbeat, summery vibe to it. Yeah, I think it suits the song quite well. The main element of the drop here is the development of the melody. So not only has it reached the peak of the filter being removed, which changes the timbre to be brighter and more obvious, it has a lot more harmonic complexity as well, and speeds up and just adds in lots of fun, energetic, upbeat feeling into it. Yeah, so it's in the C blues scale, which is the blues scale. It's always good for writing good melodies. I use it a lot. It's just a very useful tool to be able to understand and have, especially when writing melodies. I won't play the whole thing because it's quite long, but the song is on the channel now if you want to listen to it. So here we sort of reach a transition point in the song where the melody sort of died out a bit, and it starts to develop a little bit more. I like adding in sort of environmental sounds, I guess you'd call. That aren't necessarily from instruments or synths or anything like that, but maybe just sort of sounds from real life or anything that sort of just adds to the story and the theme. And because I was sort of imagining maybe beach pool party type thing, I sort of added this jumping in the pool water splash sound effect that I'll play it now because I quite like it here. It's quite effective. Yeah, so what I did is I just got a sound effect of the water just online, and then I sort of chopped it up and applied sort of these just applied the faders and the automation to it just to make it sound a bit more realistic. I think the main part of what really sells the effect is the master filter on here, which removes all of the high-end frequencies and only leaves the low ones, which is equivalent to what you would hear underwater, where the high-end frequencies travel less, so they'd be quieter, or you wouldn't hear them at all, which is what sort of creates the effect of being underwater for this part and then slowly rising up, which I quite like. Yeah, so for this next part, a lot of it is quite similar to before, so I won't do too much detail into it. The biggest change is the bass here. I've cut it up a bit so it sort of only hits on each beat, which really adds to the groove, sort of bobs it up and down a bit. And then it switches the emphasis, which is just adds a little bit of the funk into it as well. As well as there's a few of these rises here until it goes into sort of this halftime section as well. And I sort of imagined the rises, when I was putting them in, they sort of sounded like waves, sort of washing away elements of the song. So I'll play this bit because I feel like you can kind of, if you imagine them as waves washing away sort of different elements of the drums or the synth, you can sort of imagine it having that effect, which is quite cool, I think. And sort of washed away, and now it's in the halftime section, as well as over here as well, where it transitions into the different groove. I think it's just a nice little detail that things like that really add to the character of the song without really too much complexity. It's just about finding the right sounds and putting them in the right times and just sort of really having the vision for what the story of the music is that you want to tell. And I feel like that's quite beneficial into coming up with these ideas and adding them into your music. Now this next section goes quite well following what I just said about having the intuition about the theme and story of the music that you're making, because it is a very different style, not necessarily style, but just contrasts the first section quite a lot. And if I didn't have the understanding of sort of the vision I wanted for the music, I felt that it might have not gone the way it did and sort of just felt like a different song completely. But I feel because I had those ideas and feelings I wanted to capture, it managed to end up going together quite well in a moving and meaningful way. The next section is based around sort of this groove of the drums and the bass. It's a different chord progression. It's in a minor key now, but it still does feel connected because it has the similar elements of the drums and the synths and things like that, and just sort of motifs like how it builds up and just the style of the melody as well. I'll just skip ahead a bit just to get a little bit of the groove to notice that it is quite a bit different. So it's definitely a bit more based around the rhythms. Lots of elements sort of have contrasting rhythms, which does work. It's quite a funky sound, I think. But I think the bit that sells this section is the melody, and I wanted to keep the main groove simple so that there was space for the melody to actually come through. What I do think makes this section so obviously contrasting when it first hits is in fact the drum beat, because like I was saying before, is that the bass and the drums are often quite unnoticed or very subtle, but have such an effective purpose in the song that when something changes about them, it's not always obvious at first, but it's very, very noticeable that there is a change. And I think that's used here as well with the rhythm of the bass line, and also just the different kick. The bass drum is of different rhythm as well. So if I just have a look inside of the drum pattern here, basically the entire drum pattern in the first section was just on the beat every single time, which is very effective for creating that big, energetic sort of party sound, which is what I was going for. But for this, I wanted a bit more chill and just subtle and sort of less obvious as to the direction of where it was going. So by using the kick drum here with sort of offbeat pattern here, it sort of establishes that meaning inside the groove while still being subtle. I think that's one of the great things about the kick drum, is that it really defines the groove. I've added I haven't talked as much about the melody in here because I still think it's I just wanted to put more focus, and I think I put a bit more thought into the actual groove than just the melody here. But I do want to talk about this a little bit at the end, because it sort of has this strange sound effect here, and sort of just kind of cuts off a bit. It doesn't seem to fit with the rest of it. So I'll just play it here. I'll just go back a bit just to give some context. So it has that very harsh B note right here, which is not in the scale of C minor, which is what this is in now, which you don't see that type of dissonance in the rest of the song, which is why it's quite out of place. But it is quickly cut off by sort of this record scratch in the far left ear here, which I won't reveal why just yet, but it was a intentional decision to put that in there, and it'll make sense later down in the whole project. So I just wanted to notice that, just put a note there just for that. So this is here where I think what I was saying before about the kick drum really shows what I'm meaning about it, how it really defines the groove, because once I've sort of returned to that kick on each beat, you can really notice how much it's changed and how energetic it feels now. We'll just give it a bit of a play. You can already hear it's very subtle, but there's something about it that just brings up the energy and really adds in the very determined direction at which the music is traveling. So just coming to the end of the song, I want to just quick way just to add energy into that, and a lot of ways to do that is to sort of either add in contrasting frequencies. So at the moment it's focused a lot on the bass, so slowly as the beat builds up and the melody sort of approaches the end, I've slowly added in these synths, high-pitched synths sort of rising up that fills sort of the space of the mix. So similar to the beginning where I was developing up the groove at the very start and it was very focused on the high-pitched frequencies, adding in that bass really filled out the sound and added in the energy. It can work either way. Finally, I think the biggest change in the end is just this last melody here, which is sort of reminiscent to the one in the beginning, which is what I wanted to keep these two sections connected and to feel like they're part of the same song, but it's still very clearly a different feeling in the music, in the groove. I'll just solo in a second just to hear it. I think what it really separates from the first one is that it has these couple of notes at the end which break from the rhythm and just provide just a bit of contrast and difference, which is quite nice for the end, accompanied with all the rest of the layers. It has quite a nice effect, I think. Finally, just these last bar here, all I did was sort of repeat out the third beat and just added it one more at the end here, just to sort of ground the music and just sort of alert the listener that it's coming to the end, so it's not just an abrupt stop, as well as cutting out some of the drums and just making a bit of the frequencies more subtle. It kind of gives the impression that it's the end, so that when the music does all cut out, if that's what you want, it's not confusing or anything like that. Let's give it a play. And of course the splash sound effect at the end, just to sort of once again reinforce the theme. So yeah, that's the project. I will probably make another one of these in a month. Yeah, so just make sure to check out my TikTok. It's just the same as my YouTube if you want to sort of see the songs progress day by day. And yeah, I think that's it for this video.